Brodes Media.
It looks like the Sixers got their guy. Nick Nurse is now your head coach of the Philadelphia 76ers. And it's hard to be mad at this, right? I don't think I've come across a Sixers fan who isn't pleased with the new addition. There's a lot more to be done, but in a grouping of very strong candidates, you landed arguably one of the strongest candidates for your head coach, and I'm excited. I'm excited about what he can do with an aggressive scheme defensively. How is that going to impact the growth of Tyrese Maxey on that end? There's a few things we do know about Nick Nurse. Your starters are going to log 1 billion minutes, and I'm interested to see if that changes at all. He is familiar with Daryl Morey, and Daryl Morey is a very analytical mind. How is that going to mesh together with maybe the usage rate of some of these dudes? Embiid, keeping him upright and ready to rock for the postseason. He will not be afraid to wear you down and put his trust in the big dogs, which I don't mind. I think that's how you're supposed to win. You go out with your top performers. With that said, though, we need to value Embiid's health and get him to that finish line in a reasonable position for him to showcase his worth when we're talking about basketball during the spring. Not afraid to call you out with the media, and maybe that's not a bad thing. Doc wasn't too feisty this past year with the media. He was definitely more aggressive when he had to deal with the Ben Simmons thing, and maybe that's really just a definition of how soft Ben Simmons really was. But he used to take his jabs, and then when the media and fan base had certain questions that he claimed were ridiculous, he would then continue to coach and use some of those changes and use some of those adjustments that we deemed reasonable. And he thought, no way, you want me to pull Ben Simmons? You want me to yank Ben Simmons? Yes! Yes! He can't make free throws. Yes! But Nick Nurse, he has a history. Excuse me, Pascal Siakam? I don't care where you fall on the list of talent on my roster. If I think what you're doing is unacceptable, I will take shots in the media if I feel that's the button I need to push to get you motivated to fix the problems. I want to win a championship. I've won a championship, granted Kawhi Leonard being a big reason why. But I know what it takes to get there, and if what I'm seeing isn't fair enough, then I might have to take an approach to the public. If that's what I need to do, he did the same thing with Gary Trent Jr. He's going to have a short leash, though. If you're in the doghouse, you may very well be in the doghouse. So I'm looking at some role players and wondering what's their role going to be? And does the coach have enough trust in you for you to work through some of the ups and downs that you're about to have? Because, well, that's why you are a bench piece. Because you're not consistent enough, or else you would be a starter. But that sounds very Doc-esque, no? Right? It's almost like that's how this goes. Now, you could look at Miami and say, well, Eric Spoelstra has got Highsmith in an NBA playoff game, Game 7 on the road. Highsmith. We got undrafted guys. Well, I don't have an answer for you there. I don't really have an argument. I want that, right? I want that to be here. It would be nice. At this rate, though, we have to see what Daryl Morey provides for the coach. I like this hire more than D'Antoni. Right? I mean, some are trying to put the pieces together that, well, this is a Daryl Morey guy. And if this is a Daryl Morey guy, what does this mean for James Harden? I don't think there's a correlation here. D'Antoni, if you went down that road, yeah, you know what? I'll get behind the whole, well, What does this sell to Joel Embiid? What does this mean for James Harden? Let's be honest here. If we're looking at the James Harden effect, him walking is best for the team contractually, but him walking hurts the win now mode. As bad as Harden was, as up and down as he is, and with time, I'm starting to hear some fans get convinced that it would be a good idea to run him back with a new head coach, and maybe there's something to it. Look, it's not as if Nick Nurse has this fantastic background to support some beautiful half-court offense. Let's get tremendous talent and someone who can break down players in isolation. And, you know, when he's on the top of his game, James Harden does excel in the half-court. Let's do something here with that. I'm already starting to hear that transition of, well, maybe it won't be the worst idea because, you know, if he does leave town, then you don't really have enough to feel that juice again, and that's reasonable. It is. I just don't want to get tied to a Tobias Harris deal again. I'm not convincing myself. I'm just letting you know the pulse that I'm getting, the read that I'm hearing. Here's one awesome part of the Nick Nurse thing. I believe there's so much value in being on the sidelines against Joel Embiid and against the Sixers and recognize the weaknesses from that part. You could self-assess and be in the room. For example, if Doc Rivers wanted to sit down and say, okay, let's pretend I'm on the other team. Let's pretend I'm the coach of the Boston Celtics. What would I do against my own squad to try and attack them? That only goes so far. I wouldn't be against a head coach doing that, but it doesn't mean the same unless you're actually doing it. You're in the war. Your head is down and you're legitimately trying to force the Sixers into hell. It's a different mindset. It's a level that you can't get to if you're just doing the good old self-assessment. I don't have a problem with the self-assessment, but I also think that, you know, if you're a head coach of the Sixers, why should I waste my time on my own deficiencies and this and that? I know who we are. I know where we have our strengths. I need to study the opponent and realize that there needs to be X, Y, and Z that we do to expose their flaws. There's only so much time to kind of go over everything. You'd probably put more of your time and a higher percentage of your research on what the other team does poorly, and you already know what you do well, what you don't do well, what can we do to kind of expose them, right? Like, there's only so much you can do in the self-assess because there's a lot to point at. When you're on the other team, and the majority really is focusing on the Sixers, like Nick Nurse was able to do in a couple postseason series with different personnel, which gives him a lot of different views on it, it's going to go a long way because now he sees it in the mind of the opposing head coach.